Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Dating Doc TV. Today we have a special guest, and that guest is right here, ready to join me. Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How's it going?
Hi, it's going great. Over here in Texas, it's 7:30. What time is it for you?
Chicago, 7:30.
Oh, there we go. Perfect. Well, I don't know how spring forward is doing for you, but over here, my days are going by super, super fast. Like by the time I knew it, I was like, oh my God, it's ready to host the podcast already. It's 7:30. What?
I know it's crazy. And every year we have to do the same thing twice.
I know, it's like and then you get ready for the backward hour, and then you get ready for the forward hour. It just repeats itself, and it's like, "Oh, yeah, I'm used to spring forward." It's like my days are gonna go super fast, but at least the sun's out longer, so, people that deal with seasonal depression, they're like, "It's going away now," because, now the days are longer, and I'm like, "Hey, good for you." I was like, "Great for the sun coming out longer. Summer is coming." I don't know about you, but I like to kayak a lot. I don't know if that's, like, readily available out in Chicago.
You could kayak down the Chicago River and you can see all the architecture. I've never done it, but I've heard it's a blast. I
Oh my
usually
gosh.
I'm usually working, so I'm usually inside most of the time. But when I do get out, it's usually just for long walks.
Okay, okay. Well, please introduce yourself to our guests who are watching. Just give a little quick little tidbit about yourself.
Cool. My name is Tripp Kramer. I'm a dating coach for men. Been doing it for 13 years, helping shy men, but not only shy men, but mainly men who just have issues with meeting and attracting women. And I was a former, shy guy, kind of nerdy guy myself. I still am a nerd, but I've been able to, figure out on my own how to meet women and how to build attraction with women. And so after learning that, I decided to help guys who also have those same issues. And it's just been a real, just awesome adventure the past decade, helping guys and seeing just the results that guys can get if they really put themselves forward and learn the right, techniques and formulas for understanding how women work and how one can become confident.
Wow, how long have you been doing this for?
13 years. So since 2011, I would say.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So you've been in it for a while then. So I was like, you probably have numerous experiences and numerous encounters with different people. Do you
Yes.
mostly work remotely or in person with your clients?
We work remotely and in person. So I have a team of coaches and we work with guys in our virtual program. So we do Zoom calls and help them. But we also just launched what's called approach boot camps. So we have a team of coaches that fly all around the United States and we're even expanding into Europe in London, and we have little boot camps that happen every weekend where a group of guys can work with a coach and go out and approach women so they can learn the cold approach method of how do you meet women in person during the day and at bars. And we train them on how to do that in person. So it's a full weekend boot camp of talking to women and learning how to, get their numbers and flirt with them and things like that. So we have all different kinds of options that help guys.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I was looking into that boot camp that you're talking about. And was there one out in Texas that's in Austin?
There is one in Austin.
Okay, I did see that because we do
Yeah,
have a
in
branch of
April.
the Daily Doc is in Austin. And I was like, oh my God, that's so crazy that he also is branching out to Austin. That's also why I was curious, like where you were located. I was like, but then you were telling me that you're expanding to all these places and doing those boot camps in different areas. That's really cool. And I was seeing that these events must be really popular because when I was looking through them, they were always like sold out, or only a few tickets left. I was like, wow, these must be really popular. So does that tell you that people are ready to like get off the apps and they want to get those personable skills again?
Yeah, totally. It tells me a few things. One, that, like you said, people want to meet women in person. I think that maybe about 5 years ago, when online dating was, doing, I mean, it was, I would like to say maybe 5 years ago, online dating was peaking. Okay. So everyone was online. And now it's come to a point where online is really hard for men. So we've really come back to the, and I'll say for women, just what I've been hearing is they get annoyed too of meeting guys in the dating apps. So in person is really coming back, and people really want to meet people in person because they're so sick of all. the swiping and meeting people and getting
Mhm.
on, and it just gets really annoying. So that's definitely one of the cases. Also, I just don't there used to be a lot of companies who used to do these kinds of approach boot camps, and they just don't really exist anymore. So we're trying to be, the main company who really can do this and go international with it, just because there's not a lot of opportunities for men to work with coaches in person. So that's another reason why I think they've been so popular.
Wow, yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, there's been a lot of articles that have came out recently that people are so tired of the apps, they're like ready to be off them. And like, I would say like the like singles event and speed dating is kind of the in thing right now because it's getting away from the apps as being in person. And sometimes I wonder if people have really really high expectations when they do that, just because just because you go to this one event, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to find your match like instantly, right? And I would think that's the same thing on the apps, right? It's like just because you're on the app for 5 minutes doesn't mean you're going to find your match in 5 minutes, right? So sometimes when people are asking me like, oh, should I go to these event stuff? And I'm like, yeah, put yourself out there, go out and meet new people because you never know, if you will meet someone you like or if you don't, right? Because I feel like you still benefit from both experiences, right? Whether you meet someone, you're like, oh my God, we hit it off, right now. Or no, I didn't really meet anyone right now, but it doesn't mean I won't meet someone in the future, right? At another event or afterwards. So I always tell people, like, don't be discouraged. Or a lot of people, I feel like they're, for lack of a better word, almost kind of scared to go to these in-person events. And I always tell them, like, no, why are you scared? But I guess it's a little bias coming from me, from someone who's not shy and who likes to be on camera and likes to talk to people. So of course I'm like, yeah, go. Like maybe you'll see me there too. So do you have any word of advice, like really quick, for people that are afraid to get off the apps, but they do want to go to in-person events? What would you say to them to
Yeah,
leave
I
the
want to
app?
pick. Yeah, I want to piggyback off of what you said. It's when you do something like that, manage your expectations. That's the best thing. That's really one of the best things you could do in life. Manage your expectations, and that you're going to be ripping off the band-aid. So when you go to one of your first events, or maybe you go to an approach boot camp, or maybe you're just going out and you're trying to socialize by yourself, manage your expectations. Don't expect much. Expect it, if anything, to be hard, to be a little nerve-wracking, and to know that it's probably not going to go your way. But the best thing you could do to make it, at least in your mind and in your mindset, for it to go your way is just to do it. So yeah, you're going to go and approach, you're going to go talk to people, you're going to screw it up, it's not going to be smooth. You might even embarrass yourself. You might say something that you're like, why did I say that? You might go and not talk to anybody. It might be really tough for you and you barely even get out any words. It's just going to take a lot of times doing it. I'm all about reps. So repetitions, everything takes repetition. So if anything's really hard or nerve wracking, it's okay to try something out and it not be perfect. Anyone who's ever succeeded in life has had to try things over and over and over again. So you want to be, and by the way, I should mention, in our approach boot camps, there's a reason why the guys who do it, we have them approach anywhere from like 30 to 50 women in a weekend. And that's because we need the reps in. It's a boot camp. We want you to approach, because we know that all those approaches are not going to necessarily go perfect, but you're practicing. You're practicing talking to people. You're practicing getting in the headspace of what it's like to talk to people in person. And you're trying this out for maybe potentially the first time, and it helps you break through that anxiety. So you just have to manage expectation and just take action.
Oh my gosh, I was about to say that's wild. I was wondering like how many people, that they were approaching, and then you were telling me it's like 30 to 50 women. Oh my gosh. But that makes sense when you're talking about the reps, right? Because it's, they might be really, really shy at first, but then
Yeah.
probably by like the 20th one, they're like, okay, I got my script memorized, like, or I know what I'm about to say. And, like, I'm
Yeah.
sure in that process, they will start, if women are rejecting them by the 20th one, right? I'm sure they'll learn how to handle it a little bit better, right? Cope with it a little better. And they're like, you know what? Not that one. I'm gonna go to another one, right? Is which I hope that that's the intention of, right, of like getting all these reps in, and like so that way they're like, okay, it didn't work out with woman number one, but that doesn't mean it won't work out with woman number two.
Yeah. And anything in life, especially in dating, takes volume. So it doesn't matter if you're nervous or not. You're still going to need to get the reps in. You're still going to need to do volume, because you don't know who's going to connect with you. You don't know who you're going to connect with. I was recently, actually, I was on one of my long walks today, and I was thinking about this idea that you just never know which woman that you approach is going to find you attractive for doing nothing. So what I mean is women have, and men really, they have a wide variety of the types of people that they like. You know, you ask someone, what's your type? Not everyone says the same thing. Yeah, we all might potentially be attracted to like a Megan Fox or whatever, but really at the end of the day, people have like, oh, I like this kind of girl who's like this, short hair, brown hair, and women are like, oh, I like guys who are a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller. I've heard it all. So if you give yourself enough chances to actually approach, you get some freebies once in a while. So imagine you go and approach a woman. Maybe it wasn't your smoothest approach. Maybe you were even a little bit nervous, but she happens to like guys that look like you, and she's going to give you more of a shot. Well, how would you ever even get to a point like that if you didn't approach? So I'm not saying that that's why we get volume in because we're just kind of crossing our fingers and hope that one girl finds us attractive. That's not the point. But I'm just saying that even that is a nice little bonus inside of, well, you can sit home and do nothing all day, but you never know when you go out, you might just find someone who's really into your look.
Exactly.
At the worst case.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like it goes back to what you were saying earlier, like, managing your expectations about like, not necessarily having to set the bar low, but I feel like obviously when you set the bar super high, then that's when people get heartbroken really quickly, as well as in what we're about to get into, which is toxic relationships, right? It might seem like it's so, great in the beginning and you're attracted to all these things that you think you like. And then you really start dating the person and now you're just like, oh my gosh, like what did I get into? And some of the videos I'm about to show you are from people who that's was their main response when they were like, well, maybe I didn't know that they were toxic like immediately, but I knew after the fact, right? So I feel like that's a lot of things like people also relate to that they never know in the moment, but they will know after. And it's the after part that we want to try to help people avoid, right? If we can give them tips or anything like that. But that's the main thing. So I'm about to show you a video right now of a couple people I asked at the mall here at La Quintera, and these are the answers that they gave me. So we're just asking about toxic traits. So who am I?
My name is Erica.
Hi, Erica. So I want to ask you, why are we attracted to toxic traits and or red flags? What do you think?
I think because humans are creatures of habit, and when people are born into that type, like a toxic environment, they tend to gravitate towards more toxic relationships in their adult life. So I think that could be a big reason why people stick with the toxic relationships. Or
You guys ever been in a toxic relationship?
I have, yes.
Okay, what about you?
I have as well.
Okay, and what made you attracted to these toxic people?
I think I was kind of bombarded. I didn't know it was toxic at first, and then when you start to get to, realize the person and how they act, then it kind of turns into something else. And I thought that was the best thing for me at the time. So it was kind of hard to realize and open my head and open my mind into, other options. So yeah, kind of got stuck.
Yeah, what about you?
I'm the same way. I didn't know I was getting myself into a toxic relationship. You really learn over the course of the relationship how truly someone is, and now I know what to look for when dating in the future. But yeah, I wasn't attracted to anything specifically that was toxic. I just didn't know what I was getting myself into.
Right. So that was a quick video. Some of the best responses I got. I got a few more, but I kept those for you to kind of elaborate on. So, what was your take on what they had to say? Going back to the toxic traits, is that something that you might presume, but you still pursue anyway? With the kind of intent of like, you know what, that's kind of a red flag to me, but I'm gonna let it slide anywhere. I'm gonna let it sit in the back of my head, and it's kind of like a yield sign right now, and it's not like a stop sign. So, what do you think when it comes to when you're in this environment of dating, and what if you haven't actually dated in a long time and people tell you like that's a red flag, that's something you should look out for, or maybe they even knew the person and they were like, no, 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 like that person is a cheater or that person's a liar. When you're out of the dating world for a long time, are those things that you kind of ignore and you're like, oh, I'll find out for myself if that's true?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people tend to ignore. Well, I think it's different for men and women, to be honest. I'll speak for men since I
Okay.
represent the guys. But for men, we're really good at overlooking red flags because we at default just don't have a lot of options. Men at default don't have as many options as women. So we might get together with a woman, and if you're just an average guy who ends up with, a cute girl or just any girl that you kind of like and you got a shot, but she's got some red flags, well, you're in a scarce mentality. So that means that because you don't have many options and this is your only option, you're going to tend to look that over more and you might give it more of a shot, which is a disaster and can be a really big problem. And I think that's one of the reasons why people end up in really bad relationships. So that's what I'll say on the men's side. That's one of the reasons why they might get into a toxic relationship is because they just won't they they won't or they'll I will say not they'll keep going with someone even though they see those flags. They'll probably call a red flag a yellow flag and they won't stop the relationship soon enough because they're in scarce mentality.
Yeah, I that's a very interesting take. I I know you're speaking for the men, right? Because you're an expert in like all things male, right? So I think it's an interesting take because I wonder if that's how maybe some, not all, women feel too. Like they feel like their dating pool is very, very thin, right? And that comes back to what I talked about earlier when you were talking about, people always have a preference, right? They have a preference of you look like this, or you do this, or you act like this, right? And I feel like that ties back to what you were saying with men, like the men have a really tiny pool of, people to date. And I feel like that could also reflect back on women too. But I can see your point of how men even have it a little bit smaller because I think too as a woman that our pool of people that we can pick from is a little bit larger than versus the men because I do feel like in my experience and all the male friends that I have, they also do kind of have a hard time, like finding people that they genuinely have connections with, not just like a one night stand or it's just like we just went on a few dates and then it kind of ended, right? And I feel like, hearing your perspective, I've definitely seen it. I've definitely seen it. And then I feel like the women who are extremely, extremely picky, almost to the point of I wouldn't label them like 100% in the like selfish and narcissist category, but once they're in that kind of category or they feel like they're at a certain level, then their pool of dating becomes extremely, extremely small because they feel like they're a 10 out of 10. So that person has to match them. And if it doesn't match a 10 out of 10, or if they're not an 11 out of 10, they're like, bye.
Yeah. It's interesting when it comes to men and women. Women might think that they have not a lot of options. They might say, "Oh, there's no good men out there. There's no good men online." But it just doesn't compare to what men go through. I mean, I say some, I'm being nice here. Many men will have literally zero options. Where women say oh, I don't have any options. No, they have options, but they might not be great options, or maybe they're just not filtering properly. I don't know. But men will have zero options. They'll go online, start a profile, and they'll get no matches. They'll go out into the world, they'll go to a bar, they never get talked to, they never get hit on. I mean, ask any of your guy friends how many women have ever hit on them. You'll get some single digits, maybe even zero.
No, I
And
should definitely ask that question. I know one male that's extremely, extremely attractive, and he would probably be the exclusion of like, no
Mhm.
women have come to me before.
Yeah, you'd have to be a pretty attractive guy. You'd have to be the top of the top to get that kind of attention in person. But for a female, you don't have to be the top of the top to get that kind of attention. It's just how the mating world works. This is just how humans mate. The male goes for the female. So the man penetrates, the woman receives, and that's just how it goes. So for men, there's just a little bit more of a leap for them to get to the point where they have more options. And to bring it back to the topic, you know, another reason why a man or a woman might get into a relationship with someone who's got toxic traits can just go. I'm not a psychologist, but I've learned some of this stuff and I've read books on it. Is that you might end up having some past traumas that are keeping you in the toxic relationship. And this is going to be really interesting. This is like one of the theories. But one of the theories in psychology is you are seeking a mate that will help you replay your past childhood traumas in order for you to have an attempt to try to solve it.
Oh my
It's
gosh.
not logical. It's very irrational.
Yes. What you're saying is actually something I had researched too for the topic, the science behind it. And that was one of the things that it said. It said that people that are often in toxic relationships, they the same thing. They try to filter out their past trauma, and it's like, well, and or they justify it by, oh, I've been through that in the past or my childhood, so like I can do it
Yeah.
again, or they accept it, and it's like, oh my gosh, no, I feel like that's not an okay to accept it. But yes, I was looking into that too, and I was like, wow, there's even the psychology behind of like why people do this. Like it's not just like a really quick action, right? It's like there's actually some science behind it. So
Yeah,
these were
it's
some of like
interesting,
the
right?
main things that I had Googled, and I wanted to share it with the audience right here. And you can elaborate on them for sure. So this is the biggest thing. Like, why are we talking to toxic traits? And the biggest one that was on that said, toxic relationships, they make you feel good. And I was like, do they make you feel good? And, I was just saying,
Well,
like,
they do. They have ups and downs. That's why it feels so good because the highs are high and the lows are lows. And the reason why the high is so high is because there's a low. So, for example, if you're in a toxic relationship with someone and you guys are fighting and there's all kinds of negative emotion, there's jealousy, there's drama, that doesn't feel so good. Or maybe, well, actually, to get even deeper into the woods, for some people it does because that's what they know. But what ends up happening is you make up. So then you make up, and it's amazing because you guys just had this crazy fight and yelling and jealousy, and then you make up, and then you feel amazing. So it almost becomes an addiction to the toxicity that's in the relationship.
yeah, is that like equivalent of people who use the term like makeup sex? They're like, oh, it's the best thing ever. We just had a fight, but we made up. And, that I think that's part of the
Definitely.
addiction part you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's the reason why. It's because you just went from a very low to a very high, so it feels good.
Yeah, that was one of the crazy ones. Here's another one I saw. So this is what we were actually just talking about, the familiarity part of it. So it was like people that have experienced these similar traits in their
Yeah,
past, the
this is
trauma
it.
part you were talking about. It was like they don't see it as a red flag or an error kind of thing that's happening or something that they should kind of like fall back and look. They think actually, you know what? No, I've been through this. This is normal to me. And I feel like that's a little scary.
Yeah, exactly. This is what they know. They don't know. So let's give an example. Again, I'm not a psychologist, so this is just stuff that I've read and talked about and talked to people about and all that. But you'll you'll have grown up in a family where your dad abuses your mom. So let's say you're a woman in a relation in a family where you've witnessed your dad abuse your mom. I'm not saying that that woman will end up in an abusive relationship, but she definitely has a good chance of being in there because that's what she knows. Even though it's wrong, it's still traumatic and that's what she's seen and that's what she knows. So it's not so strange to her to be in herself in an abusive relationship where the opposite might be true. Let's imagine you're someone in you're a woman, for example, in a or a man in a very happy household. You see your parents kissing and touching and very affectionate, and they're together and they're not divorced and they're very happy. And even though you see them fight, you also see them make up, and you go, oh, okay, you grow up and you go, wow, that's what a relationship is like. That person will most likely not stand for being in an abusive relationship. They would not find themselves in one because they'd be like, no, that's not how it should be. Because they know what it's like to witness a healthy relationship.
Yes, that makes total sense. And I was like, that was just what we had touched base on. The other one was also going into the addiction part that you had mentioned. I was like, wow, you're just on point. It's like you saw this
I'm
one.
hitting all of them. Yeah.
And I was like, so this one is about the neurochemistry and addiction part, which is, what you're saying about the super highs of the highs and the lows of the lows, right? Because you're at the low point, but you make up to the high point, then everyone's like, oh, it's okay. It's wonderful. I'm running on cloud nine. Because I've known a lot of friends who have been in toxic relationships and they don't, and most of them say the same thing. Like they don't know at the time, or they do know it and they choose to stay in it. And it's almost the same cycle of we fight, we make up, we fight, we make up, we fight, we make up, right? Until eventually they either have a kid together or until eventually like actually takes, they both part ways.
Yeah, I think it can be a tease because there is so much making up that maybe you think in the back of your head, you're in denial basically. You think, no, this is going to work out. We're going to make this work. And then what happens too is maybe you're in the relationship for such a long time and you've gone through so much. And I've seen this with anecdotally, I've seen friends who've been in toxic relationships and they get to this point where they tell me they've worked so hard. They've gone through couples therapy. They're trying to fix everything, and they do become successful at times. So they fix some stuff, but not all of it. So they become so invested in it that they end up missing out on other relationships and other, positive experiences they could be having because they stay in this one only because they feel like they're basically trying to get this ROI. They put so much in that
That's a
they're
good way
like
to put it.
thinking there's got to be a rainbow, gold at the end of the rainbow here. Like there has to be. So they just keep going in until they realize, wow, it's been 3 years, 4 years. Okay, this is not going anywhere.
I know
This
why.
has to end.
That's a good point when you put it as like it's a return on investment thing. And do you think because people are anticipating this, invisible return on investment, whatever that might look like, whether it like leads into like always being happy all the time or leading up into a proposal or engagement, like those kinds of things. Like, do you think that they just lean on to hope that's not there?
That's how do you mean?
Meaning like because they're like anticipating this return of investment kind of mentality, that they always have in the back of their head like this underlying hope that it's going to work out. Like,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that it could work out. And again, then it ties back into to the addiction, because when it feels good, it feels really good. And I believe that gives them a false sense of hope.
that, yeah. And I will say the friends that I've known that have been in toxic relationships, like exactly what they say. They're like, and this is how I know that they're in a bad relationship too, when they say, oh, but when it's good, it's good. And I was like, so then I say, so when it's bad, is what you're saying here.
Yeah, right. If it's good, it's good. That means when it's bad, it's really bad. It should never be that bad. If you're in a relationship for 1 day or 50 years, it should never, I mean, I'm not saying it can get to the point where it could be really bad, but there should be no reason for you to stay in something that is that bad. I have some rules that I've created for relationships if you'd like to hear it.
Yeah, you should. While I like turn it to the next slide. The last one that I saw was the biggest one of fear of abandonment. And I was like, I feel like this also ties into those familiar traits and the of you stay with what you know almost.
Yes. It then also depends on, fear of abandonment. You could have some deeper psychological wounds. You could have borderline personality disorder, and you could, what ends up happening is, yeah, you stay in the relationship because you don't want to be abandoned, because it really hurts a lot. I mean, it hurts for anyone to be broken up with or be abandoned, but for some people who have more psychological wounds, it hits them a lot harder. So they stay in even though it's really tough.
Yeah, would you say that people that are not as happy with themselves as others also tend to be in this category of fear of abandonment? Like people who, like the term when they say like, oh, you got to learn how to love yourself before you go into a relationship, right? Because that means you're fully content with yourself, and then you can, share that with another person. So you think people that are not at that stage in their life yet, or in that moment, do you think that they fall into this category?
Yeah, it's possible. It's definitely possible. I mean, if you, the thing is a person like that has low self esteem. So if you have low self esteem, you're most likely going to have a lot of fear of abandonment, because what my theory is, if you have low self esteem and then you get rejected, it's a reminder of the thoughts that you have about yourself. You have thoughts about yourself. You don't like yourself. You think you're a loser. You think you're not good enough. And you can still end up in a relationship with those thoughts. But then if someone rejects you, it confirms your own poor thoughts about yourself. And that really hurts. And we don't want to confirm our own negative thoughts about ourselves. So
Right.
that
Yeah.
turns into that fear of abandonment.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I can see how that's all. I feel like that's also hard too, when people have that kind of intention and they have this, they already have low self-esteem. And it's easy for someone like me to be like, yeah, go out to speed dating events and go out and meet some new people. But I can see how the fear of rejection can highly outweigh the pros and positives of going out.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Alrighty. So now, still staying on the same topic, I did ask a few of my male friends what they could, if they had the opportunity to talk to you, what would they ask you? Okay, so we have two different questions that
Cool.
we want to see if you can answer. Okay, so like I said, I asked a couple of male friends. I was like, hey, and I just took two of the best ones that I thought would be awesome. So this is what the first one said. He was like, why does the culture of cheating exist? Can people truly be monogamous?
Good question. Well, I wonder if he means culture of today or if he just means at all. Because cheating is not like a new thing. And people have been cheating for, hundreds of years. Can people truly be monogamous? Yeah, they can be truly monogamous. It doesn't mean that they don't desire to be with another human, most likely sexually. But yeah, it takes work. So I do believe that it's not in our nature to be always super comfortable with being monogamous. It does take a level of work of saying to yourself that you're committing to that person that you want to be with. I do think at the end of the day as well that monogamy, although harder and has more risk, is ultimately more fulfilling than just being someone who's kind of sleeping around or being in multiple casual relationships. I think it can be dangerous for our psyche, whether you're a man or a woman. So, yeah, I do believe people can be truly monogamous. It's just a little bit challenging.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've heard it from younger people that they've tried the whole like, oh, I'm gonna have like two or three girlfriends at one time. And they said that at the end of the day that they actually didn't like it. Like they were like, oh, back when I was like, back in my early 20s, they were like, who cares? I'll do whatever, right? And then, and it was like to the point where this person was like, every time they would go somewhere, they were buying gifts for like each and every person. And I was like, wow, that sounds expensive. And that sounds like a lot of work. And when you could have just tried it with one, or maybe you could have like dated one, stopped, dated the other, stopped. And I was like, I don't know if I should like commend you or I should be like, I don't know what you were thinking at that time in his life. But he definitely did agree with what you said. It wasn't fulfilling, and it was very difficult. And he was like, like mentally juggling that and like physically juggling that. He was like, yeah, I would never do that again. He was like, I was just being dumb and in my early 20s because I was like, I'm so hot, all the women want me, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay to do it in the beginning of dating. If you're dating multiple people at once, where you're on a first date with someone, and then you're on a third date with someone else, or a fourth date with someone else, and you're dating multiple people at the same time to find a partner, I mean, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. Eventually, you will be monogamous, and that gives you more time to be able to find someone who's going to be a good fit for you. But dating multiple people, it's hard enough to date someone and have a relationship and keep that going. To date multiple people at once, that's just more work. So,
Exactly. That's why I was like, wow, that sounds very, very exhausting. So now I have a video question to show you from someone who is significantly older than this person who gave me this question. This is what he
Hey,
said.
so if you had to ask a male dating coach for advice, what would you ask him?
I would ask him, how many red lights does it take before you just say, no, this isn't working, and not see him again? How many red lights?
So what do you think? What do you think for his question?
yeah, okay. So, I would say, I mean, probably one or two. I mean, I'm
One or
guessing he means
two?
like red flags, right?
Yeah, yes, it means red flags.
Yeah. Yeah, so one, maybe two. I mean, if anything, when you're dating someone, there's green flags, yellow flags, and red flags. Okay, so let's define each. Green flag is something really awesome about a person, something positive. Wow, this is a person who, there's something really great about them, and being in a relationship with them will be worthwhile. Yellow is, this is a little bit sketchy. I'm not too sure. This could be a red flag. Maybe it's something that could be a problem. Here's an example of a yellow flag. They're late to your date a couple times. So the
Oh,
first
okay,
maybe like
that's a
one or two
yellow
dates,
flag.
they're late. It's like, is that a red flag? Not necessarily. For some people, it might be. In my opinion, it's not a red flag. It's definitely a yellow flag. It's like, okay, you've been late. Is this a fluke? Is this saying something more about you? Because there are some people who are consistently late. And while that's a problem in itself, it can also be a teaser to other problems. Maybe this person has a very messy life. They're not very organized. They don't know how to keep their life together. And being late is just one of the characteristics of that person. So that's why it's a yellow flag. And then you get to a red flag. It's okay, you find out there's something that's not good about this person. So I would say, now that I'm kind of working it out with you live here, one red flag, but it has to be a confirmed red flag. It's not a yellow flag where you're not sure. It's an actual red flag. Then I would say, yeah, you call it quits.
Yeah, and it's funny because I had asked different people, but I kept his response to show you. And a lot of people were like a little bit younger, but they did say like kind of like a three strikes and you're out. Some people like maybe in their like mid 30s to 40s kind of said maybe who have a little less tolerance, they're kind of like, nah, just one
So maybe
strike, you're
that's
out.
three yellow flags, like three strikes. It's like, ooh, like you're late. You're late to the first two dates. That's a strike. That's not a red, but it's a yellow. Okay. And then you have another yellow and then another yellow. Too many yellows. This equals a red. I'm out.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, when I asked him for his answer, so I could also share with you, he did say, because he's also like a quick background on him, he is divorced and now he's just dating whenever he can or however he can. And he said it for him at his stage in his life, he's 66. He said that for him, it's just one. He's like one and done. And then when I was asking other people about, how they were feeling about the red flags or how many, when I would get the response of 3, he would be like,
Yeah.
"That's too many. Y'all are crazy. Like for me, it's just 1." But you know, he
Yeah,
is a lot
someone who's
older than
older.
most of the people he's asking.
Yeah, he's done with the bullshit, right? It's like, okay.
I know that's
He's
what I meant. I presumed that he was getting at. He's like, "No, I'm too old for
yeah,
that." He's like, "It's either you like me or you don't, and then like move on with my life."
exactly.
But yeah, it was like he's definitely a character, and other people that are asking that were younger too. It really surprised me that I don't know if they were saying because they were camera shy or they were. I would ask them like, okay, so I'm just out here getting content for Echoing Pod, blah blah. And some people were like, oh my god, actually, I've never been in a toxic relationship. And I'm like, oh really? Good for you then. So I didn't get that many of those answers. I got a few of those, but I was really intrigued by people saying no because most people were saying like yes, it's happened, blah blah blah, right? And then there was a few women that were like actually no. So they made me think about have they just not experienced enough in the dating world, or are they just, or do you think they're just lucky that they just never have experienced something toxic?
I would say probably lucky. Um, probably lucky, but maybe they knew how to spot it and they dodged it appropriately, or
Oh,
maybe
I
they are
know.
someone who, grew up and had a good family background and didn't have any traumas, and they were able to notice it without even knowing that they had that power to do so.
Yeah, I was like, I didn't even think about that. Somebody commented, they said late is a red flag. So they were talking about like I had asked if they had ever been late to dates, and they said late is a red flag. So I guess there is like a divide of people that are like, yeah, if you're late, that's red flag, like strike her out. But yeah, I think for me right now, like in my point in my life, I would think if you were late once or twice to an arranged meeting, I would consider it a yellow flag. Like especially if it was in like 5 to 10 minutes. Now if it was like half an hour or more, then I would call it a red flag. Like I would change that real quick. Like I would change my attitude about what was happening really quick.
Yeah, it depends what they say too. Maybe there was a reason for it. I mean, that depends on that. If they are late by 15, 20 minutes, they don't apologize, that's a problem. But if they do apologize, okay, you give another shot. Okay, let's say they're late again 15, 20 minutes and it's a second date. Now, in my opinion, we're getting to more red flag territory.
Right. Cuz then I just
But
feel like
I wouldn't want anyone like Erica, for example, to be too selective to the point where their date on their first date is 5 minutes or 10 minutes late, and then she ultimately just says no. You might miss out on a really great guy, and maybe that was a fluke. You just don't know. I believe in second chances, and you just never know.
I know. I feel like I'm a firm believer of that too. But do you think that there's a point when it's ever a little too much? You know, when you believe in second chances, do you think that there's a fine line of okay, that's enough, or I'm being too naive to the situation?
Well, I guess it depends what it is, but I think you're being more naive if you are giving more than second chances. But second chances, I think, is
Okay.
fine. But of course, it always depends too on what the second chance is. If they do something really crappy the first time, that person might not deserve a second chance. Late,
Right.
I think they can deserve a second chance. Also, again, depending on how they act. They're not apologetic at all. Maybe not. Seems like they just didn't care that they wasted your time. But
Yeah, I was gonna say that would be a definite bummer. As like I feel like I'm more empathetic, if they're running late because if they say like a work meeting went long or, etc. Or even if the reason is like a little sus, but they at least apologize for it and they seem sincere about like, oh, I'm so sorry that you were waiting at the table for 15 minutes and now I barely got here, that kind of thing, then I'd be a little bit more inclined to feel nicer about the situation. Like, okay, like you were a little bit late, it's not ideal, but we're humans, we're not perfect.
right.
So yeah, I'm a firm believer in second chances as well, but I do my best not to be naive with like what you're saying, like, well, you give them a third and a fourth and a fifth. And I feel like people that are in toxic relationships, they definitely tend to be in that pole of they give more than just two chances.
Yes, and they're not aware. They might not even be aware that the person they're with, that trait is toxic. They might have no idea. They think
That's
that
right.
maybe
They might just be
it's
thinking
normal.
that's normal. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. That's right. Just like we were
Or that
talking
it's
about
fine,
earlier.
or they look it over because to kind of full circle this conversation, the highs are really high, but it feels really good. So I'm just going to ignore the toxic traits and the way that this person's treated me.
Right. Okay, this is the time when I'm going to remind people who are local to us that we have a couple speed dating events coming up. Okay, so the first one we have coming up is the one for the older age group, okay, for the 40s to 60s. And you can scan that QR code at the top. So that way you can get the information on the tickets. And then also the following day, we have for our age group of the 30s to 40s. Okay, so if you're in either one of those categories, feel free to scan the QR code so you can join us. And also, just a reminder, these are for the San Antonio events, but we also do have events out in Austin. Okay. And you'll be able to click through that on our Eventbrite. Okay. So that's going to take you straight to our Eventbrite. And just one more reminder here that we want you guys to stay up to date and with your support. We have different tiers for donations here. And of course, as you go down, they get more big with what you will receive from us. And I'm going to leave it up to us for maybe about a couple minutes here. And if anyone wants to drop any questions for our special guest, I was like, I'll totally leave it open. So I'll just wait for probably a couple minutes, see if anybody wants to ask you any questions. But thank you so much
Cool.
for talking with us today. This was super, super fun. I enjoyed it. Thank you for all your knowledge and all your insight as you've been doing
Of
this for
course.
so long. I was like, it was such a fun time to hang with you. And I know you had told me that you just had a newborn, right?
Yeah, I do.
Yes, you
I do.
did. I was like, so you're a dad. How do you feel about being a
Yeah,
dad?
it's crazy. It's crazy. And I had to go through my own toxic relationships to find the right person to have that kid with. So it, it definitely is worth it. It's funny because now that I have a kid, I can't even imagine having to raise a child, which has been such a big challenge, and then having to do that with someone who's toxic or someone who's not a good fit or you settled with. I'm talking exponentially harder because even if you have a great relationship, which I like to say I do, it's still going to be hard on the relationship. It's going to be difficult. So imagine what that's going to be like if you guys are already have a very rocky foundation.
Yes, and
So
then you add a
hopefully
kid
that
to that,
scares you straight.
right? You're like, hopefully, one thing you guys all get out of this is that you guys are not in toxic relationships and you don't do it if you're going to have a kid.
What about you? Are you single, married?
I am not married. And right now, I feel like I know that's a funny question. No one ever asks me that. But right now, I feel like I'm like in the in between of like maybe I am, maybe I'm not. I was like, I definitely.
Maybe you're not married. Maybe you're not what in a relationship.
Oh no, that's so funny. I was like, I wish I could say like, oh no, yeah, maybe I'm not married. No, 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 no. I was like, no, no, no. It's like I'm like in the in between of like maybe I am, maybe I'm not. It's like there's
Like a
someone that
situationship.
I guess that's what you could say right now. That's
How long have you
definitely.
been dating him for?
Oh. I was like, I can't give out that information on the
This is what
podcast.
this show is. This is what we're doing.
I was like, I definitely like to leave it up in the air, and if people like really want to know, they will ask me.
I just
And
did.
I was like, I know you did. I was like, the people watching didn't ask, but and I was like, I would just say it's been very, very, very short, like just a handful of months, and if anything, like, but totally like very, very casual. Like it's not like, oh my god, this is like really serious.
Got it. Do you want it to be serious with him?
No,
How come?
because I may move in the future, and that could upset some people that don't want to move.
Got it. Understood.
But yeah,
Okay.
so I was like, I don't think anyone has any other questions. Thank you for hitting me with that at the end. That was pretty funny. I was like, no one
Fair
usually
enough.
ever asks, but that was so funny. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I wish you the best. I hope you being a dad is going to be awesome and great. Thank you for joining us. And thank you everyone
Thanks.
who stopped by and watched. And we will see you all next